This lesson will focus on Reading Foundations K.2, which is to demonstrate an understanding of spoken word, syllables, and sounds. The main focus is on K.2e, which is to add or substitute individual sounds in simple one-syllable words to make new words. This standard is a vital part of creating a solid foundation for future reading. The lesson provided in this presentation is based on ideas and resources from the 95% Group, MLPP, and the Florida Center for Reading Research. The last slide will provide links to these resources if you would like more information on the topics covered in this lesson. There are 3 different components that fall under this standard. While the standard only requires that you teach addition and substitution of phonemes, it is a natural progression to teach deletion when students are ready. A breakdown of the individual skills is displayed on this slide. Each skill can be broken down farther into manipulating the phonemes in particular positions, the beginning, middle, and final sounds. The skills addressed in this standard are important in creating a solid foundation for reading, spelling, and writing words. According to Reading Rockets, phonemic awareness is one of the best predictors of how well children will learn to read during the first 2 years of school instruction. If students are able to change a sound in a word in order to create a new one, they can use these skills to decode or write unknown words. For example, if a student encounters the word hit and are unsure of the word, they can relate it to a word they do know, such as it. They can add the initial sound and read the word hit. This lesson will focus on teaching the skill of substitution. However, the lesson format and materials can also be used to teach addition and deletion. It is important to note that the skills in the standard should be taught in a certain order. Students should have shown mastery in addition and substitution before moving on to deletion. Each skill should be taught in isolation and then can be reviewed and practiced in cumulative activities. The instruction presented in this module is meant to serve as an intervention for students who have not yet mastered the skills of substitution. This lesson assumes that you have already taught these skills in a whole group lesson and you have determined which students are not yet proficient. In order for this instruction to be successful, it should be taught in a small group setting with no more than 5 students. This will allow each student the opportunity to manipulate the materials and allows for differentiated instruction. This lesson is based on the Fisher and Fry gradual release model, which includes 3 to 4 different components. It includes teacher modeling, I do, guided practice, we do, and independent practice, you do. It is important that all of these parts are present each time the instruction takes place. Provided in the lesson plan in Edify are the resources needed for this lesson. You will need an Alkanen box and 3 different color chips. Alkanen boxes are a great tool used for segmenting words into phonemes. This will most likely be your student's second exposure to Alkanen boxes, as they are used to teach the isolation of sounds. You may use the printable chips provided, bingo chips, or 2-sided counters. Introduce the lesson by setting the purpose and engaging students. Explain what the lesson will focus on and why students need to learn this skill. Build interest in the lesson by engaging students in a discussion about changing a word in order to create a new one. The purpose of this discussion is not for students to produce the correct answer, but instead to get the students thinking about the lesson focus. The first portion of this lesson is the I do. Here you will model the skill for the students, thinking aloud as you do. Begin by explaining that you will be using the Alkanen box, which helps to break words into individual sounds. Model for students how to segment the sounds of a word through use of the Alkanen box. Say one sound for each chip and move that chip into the correct box. Substitute one sound for another by changing the color chip and finally, identify the new word. These tools are meant to serve as a support for students as they learn and practice the skill of substitution. The goal is that eventually, students will be able to substitute sounds mentally and will no longer need the tools. During the We Do portion of this lesson, students will manipulate the materials while the teacher says the sounds. Provide the students with a one-syllable word and then ask them to move the chips into the boxes. Next, ask students to change a sound and to change out a chip to show this process. Students should then stretch and decode the new word. It is important that every student is given the opportunity to manipulate the materials during this portion. The You Do portion is where students have the opportunity for independent practice with this skill. During this time, students will manipulate the materials, say and substitute sounds, and then identify the new word. The role of the teacher during this time is to observe students, correct misconceptions, and remodel if necessary. Each skill covered in this lesson, addition, substitution, and deletion, contains three different subsets. For example, students will learn to add phonemes in the initial, medial, and final position of a word. The same is true for substitution and deletion. For each skill, students should show mastery in manipulating the initial phoneme before moving on to the final, and then the medial phoneme. Students should have more opportunities to practice these skills. Playing bingo is a great way for students to practice and demonstrate mastery of a skill. In this particular game, you will give directions, such as, I have the word bat, change the b to a m. The student will then mentally change the sounds and come up with a new word. Next, the student will look on the card for a picture that represents the new word. Once students have covered 3 words in a row, they win. The game provided in Edify is meant to teach substitution. However, teachers could create new boards to practice the other skills covered in this standard. In order to assess this standard, teachers can observe students during the I Do portion and while playing bingo. There are also assessments available in Edify that assess addition, substitution, and deletion. The resources on this page will provide you with more background knowledge, resources, and instruction ideas for this standard.